Welcome back to another episode of The Canon. I'm your host, Terry, and today, doing another top 5 list for Avengers Endgame. Today, we're doing the payoffs and inconsistencies. I want to say plot holes, just for the alliteration, but these aren't really plot holes. These are more inconsistencies, and I want to be accurate with that. So, let's kick it off. The number one plot hole by far is director Anthony Russo or Joe, one of the Russos, popping up in Endgame as a character in a therapy session when he was also the world-renowned doctor in Civil War that died. This is the biggest plot hole because that is a plot hole within a plot hole because him as that doctor was a plot hole in Civil War, which then Zemo took over his place and they look nothing alike. I'm just joking. I'm not actually joking, but I'm joking. That's not my number one. So the real number one inconsistency, or the 5, I should say, is Captain America coming back at the end of Endgame. And so this is an inconsistency that I put at number 5 because it's like a wrap up part of the movie. It doesn't like unravel the movie per se, but it's very inconsistent with the time travel rules they set up. And people argue with me on this, and I'm thinking about actually creating a PowerPoint presentation for people to figure it out. But it is very clearly stated in the movie that what you do in the past will not affect your present. This is the way they set up their time travel rules so that they can basically go in the past and do whatever they want, and it's not going to mess up their reality. However, it's going to mess up the timeline back then, whatever. So that was the rules, meaning that if we go back and do something in the past, like kill Thanos, that doesn't mean we're going to come back to the present and Thanos is dead, or kill baby Thanos and then we come to the present and Thanos died, he never showed up. It won't affect our reality in that way. That's the time travel rules they set up. Now, Cap goes back in the past and then reappears in the present as the older version of himself who lived out his life. That's a direct conflict of the time travel rules they set up. That you can't go back into the past and then affect the present. And so if Cap went back and lived his life, that would have set an alternative reality that does not end up with him being back in the current timeline with Bucky, Sam, and the Hulk. That's an inconsistency, but again, it doesn't throw off the movie. Number 4, Tony creating his own gauntlet. Now, what we established in Infinity War was that there was one place in the universe that Thanos could go to have the material to make a device strong enough and capable to hold the Infinity Stones. There's a mythical place, Never to Lear. Thor talks about it. Rocket says he thought that place was a myth. Like, this is the place in the universe that can create these weapons. It's much like in the DC, there's there's some type of demigod or something with Wonder Woman where he creates like the strongest weapons. But, whatever. This is the place you gotta go. Thanos isn't smart enough to create one. None of his people are. And they're supposed to be a quote unquote advanced alien race, which is just a cop out, but we'll talk about that later. None of them are able to do that. There's only one place he could go to do it. And okay. Now, Dimitri or whatever his name is, he's still there. And he still has the mold. So they could have just went and got another one there. But anyway, so Tony creates a gauntlet, and he creates a gauntlet like moments after they get the stones. Now, I will say that they didn't technically say how long it was, but it looked like they just came from the time heist and started going to work on it. And so some people will say, well, Tony had been studying the Mind Stone before in the Space Stone. And I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't mean he understands the other stones and the energy signatures aren't the same. And just as inconsistent with how the gauntlet was set up in Infinity War. So the third inconsistency was Tony wielding the stones. And so we get to the climax where Tony gets the stones from Thanos and does the snap. Two issues with this. Number one, Thanos has the Iron Man gauntlet. So Tony doesn't have a gauntlet. And yet his suit is able to take the stones. Not only are they able to hold them, but they're able to like suck them off the other gauntlet. That was never established. They never established that his suit could do any of that. And so when Thanos is about to do it and Tony runs up on him, and I'm just like, okay, what was that? Like, what? I thought he was going to try to take one stone out like Thanos did when he took the Power Stone out. I thought he was going to like try to pull one stone out and then that would be kind of the fight. But he somehow sucked all the stones out and was able to hold it. Now, we already saw Hulk, barely be able to snap his fingers. Barely. He said, I'm the strongest one. I'm the one with the most gamma radiation. I'm the one that can take it without dying. And yes, Tony died from the snap, but Tony before the snap was perfectly fine holding the stones. You go back to Infinity War, and what they said was that no other being in the universe has had the might, nay, the nobility to wield not one, but two Infinity Stones. Of course, talking about Thanos. And so no one has ever been able to even hold more than one Infinity Stone except Thanos. And then he's able to hold them all together, of course. Hulk, the radiation, the strength, one of the most powerful heroes. He's barely able to hold it together to snap his fingers. But yet Tony is just holding it fine and delivering one-liners. I'm Iron Man and snaps. And yes, I get it. It's a big fan payoff, but that doesn't mean it's not inconsistent. It's inconsistent with what happened like 30 minutes prior when we saw Hulk, struggle with it. So the fact that Tony's just able to wield the stones and he's able to steal the stones, it was just inconsistent out of nowhere. The second inconsistency, back to time travel, is the alternative realities. So basically what the time rules are and what the ancient one says is that you can change things in the past, but it won't change your present. But it will change our current timeline. And so basically Banner says, well, if we put the stones back exactly where we took them, it keeps the timeline straight. That's fine if we're talking about the stones, but what about all the other stuff that we're talking about? And this is where time travel gets messy because basically they're saying, look, the old time travel rules of you change something in the past, it changes the future, doesn't apply here. However, it still applies to the past. Once you change the past, you put it on a new timeline. And so not just taking the stones, but Cap going to live there. Loki escaping with the Tesseract. All types of stuff. Cap fighting himself, seeing himself. Maybe he still thinks it's Loki, whatever, who knows. But just the number of things they did in the past. I mean, they killed Thanos they snapped him out of existence already, but, Gamora Nebula not being there, knocking Quill out, he never gets the Power Stone and, meets the Guardians. Like, that reality that they went back to in all those different years would create some very different results. And so, yes, it doesn't affect the past, but it does change their reality. And so that makes it kind of really selfish on their part, and putting the stones back exactly where they found them so Quill could still get it, but you knocked them out. I don't know. This is why time travel gets messy. And it's like when you go back and change things, not even just big things like the Infinity Stones, but small things like interacting with your past self or changing the way things go, That's going to create a bunch of messy alternative timelines. Alright, and the number one inconsistency in Avengers Endgame is Thanos whooping up on the Avengers. Here's what I mean by that. You had Stormbreaker, of course, cut through the full power of the Infinity Gauntlet easily. And then darn near killed Thanos. And so we also, of course, saw it like chop his head off in the beginning of the Endgame. Stormbreaker is supposed to be all powerful, convenient weapon. And so we get to the point where Thor not only has Stormbreaker, which almost killed Thanos, but he also has his hammerback Mjolnir, and then Cap's able to wield Mjolnir. And so it's just like, there's no shot for Thanos. Yet he whoops them worse. Thanos with an Infinity Gauntlet struggled, I would argue, more with Iron Man, the Guardian, Spider-Man, and Doctor Strange than he did with a double wielding Thor, plus a Captain America wielding Mjolnir, plus Iron Man. And so you look at all the fight, Iron Man's the only one that got like a drop of blood from Thanos. Plus you got the guy that almost killed them. Plus you got Cap with new powers. And it's like, there's no way Thanos can handle that. Not only does he handle them, and he catches Stormbreaker, tosses that aside. Mjolnir doesn't, really damage him at all. Iron Man wasn't even a contest, but then he goes on and he knocks, Captain Marvel out with one punch using the Power Stone after she was able to hold him off with the gauntlet. Makes no sense to me because the gauntlet is supposed to, or the Infinity Stones together are supposed to charge each other. They make each of them stronger. And so when he pulls one out and is able to use it to knock her out, but he couldn't do it with the full gauntlet, it didn't make sense to me. But overall, Thanos with the Infinity Stones was formidable. Most definitely. But, in Endgame, Thanos without the stones did a lot more damage. And I mean, you're talking the countless Avengers he fought in that end battle. And he pretty much would have won if it wasn't for the inconsistency of Tony having tech that could steal the stones, as I said. So you talk about all the people he ran through. And I loved it. It's just very inconsistent with what they set up. Now, some people will say, well, Thor isn't in the right shape. Literally. But for me, this is what I fall with. I would say that Thor went back in the time and got his hammer and he was like, man, I'm still worthy. So that to me, despite if he out of shape, that still says to me he is Thor. He still has his power. He is still the worthy king and champion fighter that he always was. And so, yes, you could kind of say he isn't at his peak condition, but still, he's double wielding two weapons, and he still has all his lightning and thunder powers. So, I don't know. That went kind of long, so I'm gonna actually split up the payoffs into another video. But those are my top 5 inconsistencies inside of Endgame. Go to the comment section, let me know what your top 5 were. Thumbs up, subscribe, share it around, get the convo started. And remember, if you heard it here, it's official canon.